What's going on, everybody? Welcome to PFF's live NFL Game Day show. So glad that you guys are here hanging out with us, getting ready for Week 4 in the NFL. Trevor Sikkema, Sam Monson, Ian Hartitz, Eric Eager. Fellas, we got a desk.
Yeah.
We got a brand new desk. Okay, I'm going to go around the room, and I want you guys to say something nice about our new desk, because it means a lot. We need to welcome in the new desk. Be nice, be nice hosts here. Sam, say something nice about the desk.
I'm sorry, did I wander into like carpentry hour or something? I'm supposed to comment on the grain structure?
Yes, that would actually be great.
This desk says PFF under it. The other one didn't, so it's better.
It is.
Does that
Branding.
work for you?
Branding is very important.
Yeah.
No, that works.
Briefly, I thought these were those cool things you see at a bar where you put the drink on it and they fill from the bottom. They're not, but you can imagine.
Oh, how you like clean them? You know what I'm saying? Like they're just cleaning them? I mean, we might be able to customize it still. It's just week 1 of the desk.
2022, that's what.
Okay, yeah.
I have size 14 shoes. I'm just happy that no one else can see them anymore.
See, along with that, I am very glad that we can't see our legs anymore because I have small calves. And now nobody will know that.
Wow.
You can't see the legs.
Okay.
That's what I'm thankful for with the new desk. Guys, there's a lot that we're talking about this week, not just the new
therapy session now.
that we have here. This is going to be a lot of fun. This week, there are so many great divisional games. There's obviously the big storylines with Brady and Belichick that we're going to dive into. But I wanted to start this week talking about a topic that we mentioned last week, and it was the undefeated teams. Last week, we had 7 undefeated teams in the NFL. This week, we only have 5. And to bring this discussion again, because I want to see if we have any new thoughts about whether they're real or fake, I thought it would be fun to see where each of these 5 teams were the last time they were 3-0. For the Raiders, they're our first team. They were last 3-0 when they were back in Oakland in 2002. Last time they were 3-0, they made it to the Super Bowl. They're the Carolina Panthers and the Arizona Cardinals, both 3-0 now. 2015 is the last year for both of them. Carolina made it to the Super Bowl. Arizona Cardinals made it to the NFC Championship game, so a lot of success there. But funny enough, the Rams and the Broncos, the only other teams that are 3-0, both of them, 2016 and 2019, they missed the playoffs the last time they were 3-0. So they're hoping that they have a little bit better luck this time around. But Sam, when you look at those 5 teams that are still undefeated, where does your mind go first with those teams?
I mean, that 2015 season jumps out. That was like a career year, a big outlier for, the Carson Palmer-led Arizona Cardinals, the Cam Newton-led Carolina Panthers. This was by far both those guys' best seasons, and it was the year where the Bruce Arians system finally clicks for Palmer and those Cardinals.
If you talk like best single season mixtapes, I think 2019 Lamar Jackson is really up there, but 2015 Cam Newton still
amazing.
Might take the cake. That's not mine though. My big memory from this is Trevor Sikkema in 2016 was the quarterback, and despite the miss in the playoffs, he got invited to a Pro Bowl. Trevor Sikkema invited, did not go, declined it. That's why we don't count Pro Bowls for anything anymore.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The Tampa Bay Bucks, last time they won the Super Bowl, it was against the 0-2 Raiders. Now we're coming back full circle. The Bucks back as Super Bowl champions. That was the callback that I got from this one.
All right. Any like heavy beliefs in any of the is there any team that's among this undefeated group that you guys just like are not buying at all whatsoever? I think the 2 that stand out are like Carolina and Denver, but is anybody just like totally out on these teams yet?
Carolina had an easy schedule so far, right? Week 1 they had a rookie quarterback, rookie head coach. Week 3 they had a rookie head coach on Thursday Night Football. And in week 2, they had the Saints missing a bunch of coaches, 5 starters, also displaced by Hurricane Katrina. They get another nice rest spot here. We'll see if they can continue rolling here. But this is they're going to be underdogs in this one.
I think Carolina generally is the team that, if you project this out over a season, I'm not buying them, but their schedule stays pretty nice for a lot of the season. Yeah. They're going to end up with a good record. They may even be in the playoffs by the end of it, but they're the one team of this group that I wouldn't count as contenders yet.
I think we'll know a lot more about both these teams after this week. Credit to them, though. They've had the easy schedules, but they've smashed them. They haven't been winning these 17-14 toss-ups. They've been winning convincingly.
Yeah, they're looking good. Let's look at the top 5 graded players here at PFF. Quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. At the top of the list, as expected for quarterback, it's Tom Brady. He's having an incredible year. He's playing really well. But also wanted to shout out Derek Carr. Derek Carr is in this list as well. Something that I know we're going to talk about a little bit. Wide receiver, again, no shock. Who's at the top is Devontae Adams, especially coming off that performance that the Packers had last week. But we also, Ian, we got Mike Williams in there, baby. Mike Williams, a top 5 graded wide receiver right now through the first 3 weeks of the season. Then running back, I mean, it's the normal names, right? It's Derrick Henry, it's Nick Chubb, it's Christian McCaffrey. But I feel like the grades are a little bit lower for the running backs, at least. Like it's not like any of these top-tier guys are blowing it out of the water, having unbelievable years. It's the names you thought, but maybe the grades that you don't think. So when you look at, I guess, all of these rankings here, wide receivers, quarterbacks, running backs, Sam, what stands out to you here?
Well, first of all, we can't just normalize this idea that Tom Brady at 44 years of age, of course he's the number one quarterback. This guy's career overlapped with Warren Moon, who was drafted in the late 1970s before like cell phones existed as a thing.
I mean, like Warren Moon wasn't allowed in the NFL because he was an
He went to the
African-American quarterback.
CFL.
So, yeah.
This is ridiculous. Tom Brady being the number one graded quarterback through the first few weeks of his 44-age season is absurd and should not just be dismissed as something we all expect to happen.
Quarterbacks are supposed to age like Big Ben, like we're seeing
Yes.
there. Not like Tom Brady playing better than
Who's like 5 years younger than Tom Brady and is
Right.
looking dead.
Right. Brady's almost at the point where he has thrown more touchdowns in his 40s than in his 20s. Like, we are dangerously close to that actually being a fact, which is terrifying. Eric, what about you? Anything stand out here with these rankings?
Yeah, I look at running backs. It's just harder to add value running the football in the NFL this year, and you're seeing that here. You're also seeing difficulties in terms of blitz pickups, the defenses that these teams go against, and I think that's why you're seeing lower grades by running backs.
Ian?
Derek Carr, 300 passing yards in 7 straight starts. I mean, I really thought for most of last year Derek Carr deserved to be in the top 10, top 12 quarterback conversation. He is still there. Now he's got Max Crosby and some other guys making the team as a whole better, but Carr keeps on keeping on. And yeah, got to shout out Mike Williams, the fantasy number 2 wide receiver at this point, 10th in yards per route run. Some haters might say it's a 3-game sample size and he'll come back to earth, but so far he is still pretty much living at the moon.
Also wanted to say, Zeke, road to 20, got a little bit closer last week, right?
You got 3.
We're still on that road to 20 bet that we had on the first show that we did when Ian's bold prediction was Ezekiel Elliott getting 20 touchdowns. So we are well on our way, doing a lot better than
No one can call me an idiot for that until January. Let the record show.
Well, and I mean, like, even if that's the case, right? I mean, like, situations, it didn't.
Process.
Like, you can never be you. It's always something else. I wanted to touch on a couple of in and outs as we get into the beginning of the show. Obviously, we're going to mention a lot of the key guys who are both playing and not playing when it comes to the injury report, but a couple of guys who are expected to play. We've got TJ Watt, Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, Curtis Samuel, Darrell Henderson, and DeAndre Hopkins. Those are a couple of guys that are expected to play. Of course, another big one is Justin Fields. Justin Fields getting the start this week for Chicago. What do you guys think about this? I mean, there's a lot of Steelers that I just named which were expected to play, but what about some of those guys that you see on that list, maybe in particularly Justin Fields? Some thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think the Chicago Bears are, as a short home favorite, are a value this week. I think everybody's looking at what happened last week. They're all looking at the plucky performances you're getting from the Detroit Lions. I think the Bears are a value here because either Matt Nagy coaches a better game this week or he's going to get fired at some point. And so go ahead and sell the Lions high, weirdly, for an 0-3 team, but 2-1 against the spread,
right,
and buy the Bears low.
Doesn't that just kind of like... Isn't that almost like a nail in the coffin for Nagy anyway, what you just said, the fact that we're in this situation?
I don't like betting on bad coaches against good coaches. I still think that Dan Campbell needs to earn that distinction of being a good coach before I lay off a bet like this.
I mean, if Justin Fields wasn't playing this week, he wasn't going to get back out there until like late November. Like, they have a gauntlet of nasty defenses that start after this week. If they can't get anything done this week, it's time to just pack up the whole show.
Well, and as Matt Nagy reminded us last week, this was the first time they got to see Justin Fields working with the first team offense, and Nagy was even surprised with some of the things he learned about Justin Fields. Like, imagine that, guys. You put the quarterback you just drafted in the first round with the first team, might learn a few things.
Oh, I can just hear Twitter collectively groaning when I saw that tweet where it's like, hey, we're learning stuff just like you guys, and Twitter's just bashing their head against the wall. A couple of players who are out for Sunday. I mentioned Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, he has his injury there. Julio Jones and A.J. Brown, both out for the Tennessee Titans. Not great. Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, Quentin Nelson, Chase Claypool, all of these guys are out. The Titans, how are they going to do this at this point? I mean, like, I know Ryan Tannehill was on that graphic for highest graded quarterbacks that we have so far through week 3, but telling any quarterback in the NFL to do it without your top 2 receivers, that's got to be rough.
Yeah, and they are particularly thin behind those first 2 receivers. I mean, on paper, coming into the season, we were saying if one of those 2 guys gets hurt, they might have some real problems. Both of them going down. Derrick Henry's going to get 1 million touches, and they're going to try and patch it up with the guys who admittedly scored touchdowns last week. The receiving core they have if Ryan Tannehill continues to play that well, he's going to give those guys opportunities.
I feel like Tannehill, every time he has even a mediocre game, we're all just like, okay, is the Miami one back? Like, we're still so slow to buy into this. And now, yeah, you take away his top 2 wide receivers, it could be a slow game for him. Maybe, just maybe, guys. I'm not saying the Jets are going to shock the world and do anything too big, but let's be competitive here, because as rough as Zach Wilson and company have been, you start the year against a Panthers defense that, unproven, but much better than we thought they'd be, then Belichick, then Vic Fangio at the Patriots and Broncos. Like, these have been impossible situations for him, and the Titans secondary is anything but impossible.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving that's going to happen this week because of all of the players that I think are out. And obviously, we're helping you guys get your fantasy lineups, all of your betting lineups ready for this week. But when it comes to financial advice, Western and Southern, they're going to get your game plan ready so you can be rest assured on game day. Are you buying a house, starting a family, just want to see your money grow, whatever it is, Western and Southern has the retirement, life insurance, and investment solution strategies to get you where you want to go. Check them out. Go team up with them. They're going to be able to find out exactly what goals you want and exactly how to reach them. And you can start that by going over to westernsouthern.com/PFF. First game I want to talk about. We're diving straight into these because we got so many games that we got to get to. Carolina Panthers, Dallas Cowboys. I want to mention it because we already talked. You guys could not help but talk about the Carolina Panthers. I know we briefly touched on them. You guys are saying, okay, like I'm not quite buying them, but are you buying them against Dallas? Maybe not long term, but what about this week here? Sam, what do you think about this matchup?
Yeah, look, Ian made the point. They haven't just beaten teams. They've beaten them really well, but now they've got to play the game with easy mode turned off, right? They're facing a legitimate offense with the Dallas Cowboys. Their defense has been pressuring the quarterback 47.6% of the time. That's number 1 in the NFL. But now you have to do it against guys like Tyron Smith, who's allowed 2 pressures in 3 games. It just gets exponentially harder for them against an offense as good as Dallas's, and we get to see now if it still holds up.
Yeah, and as such, Sam, I mean, you're replacing J.C. Horn with C.J. Henderson.
Huge loss.
Amari Cooper over 5.5 receptions. Better than even money, I think, is the bet to make in this one from a prop perspective.
Leave it to PFF to, just not bring up Christian McCaffrey being sidelined. I understand that in general, the running backs don't matter. We love to bring this point up again and again. But, man, the way they use him, I feel like it is going to be problematic. For Sam Darnold, seeing the ghost, holding the ball too long. Chuba Hubbard is fine in fantasy. We're firing him up as a top 15 running back because volume is king. But in terms of real life efficiency, I am concerned because Trayvon Diggs is secondary. If they can just contain DJ Moore a little bit, all of a sudden it's like, where's the ball going?
Phil Snow, the defense coordinator for the Carolina Panthers, has been absolutely in his bag this season. He has been throwing all different kinds of pressures, some pressure looks to all sorts of different offensive lines, but you mentioned J.C. Horn not being in the lineup anymore. Obviously, he has the broken foot. You had an immediate reaction. You said huge loss.
Yeah.
So obviously, they make the trade for C.J. Henderson, but what's your expectation now with Horn out?
I mean, I like C.J. Henderson within this defense. I think he's a good fit, and obviously the guy was a high draft pick a year ago, not one that we necessarily loved as much as some people did who had him as the number 1 corner on the board that year. So I think he's probably going to get something similar in terms of role, but that's going to take time. Even if he is capable of stepping in and doing the same job, like he's not going to be up to speed within a week to do that. Like They have been working with J.C. Horn since they drafted him in terms of this plan of playing all over the defense, covering the slot, having a specific role. C.J. Henderson isn't going to be doing that after a few days in the building.
I also kind of want to shout out Dallas' secondary here because I'm not going to sit here and say that Dallas' secondary is completely fixed, but Trayvon Diggs, he's got an 87 PFF grade so far. He's making really big, impactful plays. The pass defense isn't as bad as you would expect when it comes to our grading scale, but Ian, what do you think about them going up against these Carolina Panthers wide receivers? DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, those guys.
I haven't been the nicest to Sam Darnold in this offseason. Just didn't really expect him to come in and play great, and we'll see how that persists with an easier schedule. Either way, thank you, Sam, for giving DJ Moore the wide receiver 1 target share. I think he's always deserved. I mean, we always see this guy ranking in the top part of our yards per route run, one of the most predictive metrics we have for wide receivers. And this year, one of just 6 wide receivers with that target share number over 30%. So the question is, are they going to just keep force-feeding him the ball, or could we get the squeaky wheel Robbie Anderson spot, guys? No CMC. Matt Rule's been talking about wanting to get him more involved. We got the staying out to practice, working with Sam Darnold report coming out there. there. I love Robbie as a contrarian DraftKings play at just 5,100.
Really quick before we go on to our next game, with this Carolina Panthers secondary obviously now down J.C. Horn, they're going up against CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. You have a lot of faith. Those guys have to be super strong plays. Do you agree?
I mean, in your typical fantasy lineup, you have your wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, and flex. If you really want to motivate Cooper or Lamb, you can put them in that flex spot. But no, you're never taking them out regardless of the matchup, man. It helps. Put them in your top 12, 13 overall, but you're starting these guys each and every.
I love the motivation, the motivational factor with the fantasy football lineups. Sometimes you just got to change it up a little bit, motivate the team to get you a big matchup win. Okay, let's go on. Kansas City Chiefs, Philadelphia Eagles. Frank Clark, Javarius Ward, both of those guys out for Kansas City. What do you think about this, Eric? Because you follow the Chiefs extremely closely. I mean, how does Mahomes look for this matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah, I mean, Mahomes last season, 23 turnover-worthy plays, right? He has just 4 this year, but they're all turning into interceptions, right? So you think, one of the reasons why they haven't been able to cover the spread of late is because of some, turnover-worthy plays turning into turnovers. If that doesn't happen today in an Andy Reid revenge game, trying to go for his 100th win as a Chiefs coach, becoming the only coach with 100 on each, one of two teams.
Wow.
This could be the first time, in the regular season since they played the Jets in the middle of the year last year that they covered the spread.
And this line does feel like a reflection of everybody understanding that the Chiefs are beating the Chiefs right now, not anybody else. I mean, they've just had this wealth of turnovers. They had 15 on offense all last season. They've already got 6. They had 4 in the last game. Like, the Chiefs are shooting themselves in the foot time after time after time, and it's costing them in a couple of these games. But if they stop doing that, and there's no reason they shouldn't in terms of the volume of those mistakes, immediately they go back to being a team.
You have seen an appetite for the Philadelphia Eagles on the betting market, though. It started at 5.5, got out to 7.5, now it's 6.5. So people are buying back on Philadelphia because of what you're saying, the fact that the Chiefs are just simply, they're 1-11-2 in their last 14 or so, covering the number, even though they're 10-4 during that time.
Right. I'd feel better about Philly's chances of keeping this close if their left tackle wasn't out, if their guards weren't so injured, if they're suddenly, potent defensive line that we saw really take out Atlanta now is looking more like a shell of themselves. So I guess that's my big takeaway. We gave the Panthers credit for crushing the bad teams. Great job, Philly. You killed Atlanta in week 1. These last 2 weeks have been really rough, and Eric, their schedule doesn't get any easier from here on.
No, the Philadelphia Eagles are a good bet to have the worst record in the NFL, and they were going into the season. Everybody looks at Houston, but Houston gets to play Jacksonville. Houston gets to play Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Philadelphia, I mean, there is at least Dallas is a good team in that division, and you can make an argument that Washington's okay, and the Giants, Daniel Jones is playing well. This could be the team with the worst record in the NFL come season's end.
Man, I feel like when you look at the Eagles and when you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, in a way, the Eagles would present you with an opportunity to say, okay, going to run the ball a lot. We're going to control the clock. We're going to keep Mahomes off the field because that's the best way to beat the Chiefs, right? Keep Mahomes off the field, but it doesn't seem like Philly is running the ball nearly as well as you would assume with Jalen Hurts at quarterback and the guys that they have there.
Yeah, look, I don't think they need to turn into this offense where the running back gets 25 carries and everything is built off that. But non-Jalen Hurts people had 3 carries last week. That's just not going to fly against a team like Kansas City, particularly when, as Ian said, their offensive line is getting banged up. It's not what it was at the start of the season where you might be able to rely on those guys dropping back a million times and protecting Jalen Hurts. That offensive line needs some protection of its own, so they're going to need to run the ball. And look, they're built to run some of the read option stuff that Baltimore caused so many problems for Kansas City by doing. Like optioning a dude like Chris Jones out on the side, 310 pounds of him, trying to cover like a quarterback and a running back in 10 yards of space. Yeah. That didn't work against Baltimore. It's probably not going to work against Philly.
They've been facing questions about whether they're going to move Chris Jones back to the interior. I think they should on early downs when what you're talking about as a parent. It's fine if you put him on the edge and passing downs where he knows what he's supposed to do, which is beat a tackle. But to me, I think that's one tactical thing the Chiefs have in their bag right now that they can use.
Is Philly even going to take that route, though? Because you said it, the 3 carries. I was refreshing my fantasy score, 2 carries from Miles Sanders. This can't be right. I just watched the game. This can't be right. So,
but at least he made up for it with 2 catches.
Yeah, oh, thank God. With that said, though, the one guy that is running the ball, it's Jalen Hurts. He took over in Week 14 last year, 10th in the NFL, not among quarterbacks, among everybody in rushing yards since that point. So it's not pretty in Philly. Devontae Smith, underwhelming a little bit so far, but the one guy we can trust in fantasy is Jalen Hurts. The only game he's not returned top 10 top 12, I should say, QB production was that Nate Sudfeld Week 17 performance. That probably should still be investigated if we're being honest.
I think there's a prop where you like the other starting running back in this game, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, over 13.5 receiving yards. The Chiefs have to find their James White at some point. And Edwards-Helaire has not fit that bill so far. Maybe he does in this game against a weak set of linebackers for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Steelers and the Packers is another game that I know a lot of people are going to be looking at. There's a lot of history with these teams, right? I think that in past years, you would look at this game and be like, oh yeah, this is legit matchup. Can't wait. Steelers, Packers. It's a little bit different this time around. Chase Claypool ruled out of this one, so he's not going to be able to play. I mentioned a couple of the guys who were expected to play. Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, TJ Watt. But when it really comes down to it, I mean, the conversation's always going to go back to Ben Roethlisberger. And unfortunately for Big Ben this week, he's going up against an Aaron Rodgers offense that it seems like, 37 seconds is too long when it comes to allowing him to not get in making points range. So I don't know. What do you guys think about this matchup? I feel like we're making a big deal out of it when it comes to the national promos, but it feels like it might be a lot more of a blowout than we think.
Now all of a sudden it's Pittsburgh's wake. Like, that's what we're dealing with here. You look at any offensive statistic whatsoever, and the Steelers are right at the bottom. Roethlisberger's got more turnover-worthy plays than big-time throws. They're bad in terms of running the ball. They can't get Najee Harris going, so they have to feed him 19 targets in a game. They rank 32nd in PFF's offensive ELO rankings. And the technical term for that, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, is dead-ass last, right? They are a disaster right now, and they're going up against a pretty good team.
Yeah, this is an example of a game where Week 1 doesn't matter nearly as much as we all want to make it out to be. What would the spread of this game be if it was Week 2?
Right.
Right, Pittsburgh coming off beating Buffalo, Green Bay losing handily to New Orleans. What is the spread? It's not 7 or 6.5, whatever it is here, but the market's really caught up to both of these teams. In a weird way, I think it does present some value on Pittsburgh because I think that they're overreacting to both what we've seen the last 2 weeks out of both of these teams.
I sure would feel better if at least the Steelers' defense was playing a bit better because they're 13th in EPA right now. Obviously, Big Ben having his turnover-worthy plays that Sam mentioned is not helping that number or anything. But, hey, they're not world beaters, and TJ Watt, while he should be out there, maybe not at 100%. So, for me, I give a damn about 2 guys on Pittsburgh. That's Najee Harris and that's Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Because that's what Big Ben can do. He can exist in that 1 second between getting the snap and throwing the ball about 2 yards downfield and it's going to Najee and Deontay.
That's exactly what it is. Like, that is the offense right now because Roethlisberger just isn't capable of doing anything else anymore. He has reached the point in his career where he needs more help. Like, he is one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL right now at the percentage of pressure turning into sacks. And that's a quarterback-controlled number. That's where Peyton Manning was always the best quarterback in the NFL, was even if you managed to get pressure on him, you weren't going to bring him down because the ball was going to be out of his hands. Roethlisberger is at the other end of the spectrum where when you pressure him, it's almost like that's the play done because he can't get the ball anywhere else anymore.
Yeah, and speaking to that, Juju Smith-Schuster, the king of going over his receptions prop but under his yardage prop. I think a 51.5 here, you go under this because, as Ian said, he's not one of the players to care about on the Pittsburgh offense.
Najee out here getting 19 targets last week. I mean, Najee Harris's usage is unbelievable. I think he's played 96% of the offensive snaps, and the next closest running back is like 76. Like, it's just not even.
If Nick Chubb got 96% of the Browns snaps, he'd rush for 2,500 yards.
Yes, absolutely.
Najee Harris is PFF's #1 back. We have a cool thing called expected points, taking the production out of it. Pure volume, not Derrick Henry. Najee Harris, RB1. Madness, guys. Madness.
I can't believe it. And just a little bit more to the Steelers and kind of more on like a 30,000-foot view on this. The big problem with investing in Big Ben for another season is you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, it felt like things were never going to get better enough for him this year, right? If you wanted to say that, like, okay, like you said, he needs more help. He needs a little bit of this, a little bit of that. They don't have the time because by the time it feels like the Steelers get that, Big Ben will retire.
But they got him a running back.
Well, yeah,
But the other
19
thing
target
was,
running back.
they couldn't get him 5 offensive linemen. We had offensive linemen retire. David DeCastro retiring in the
They
offseason.
essentially had to find an entire offensive line in the offseason.
And Matt Canada, they promised us things. They promised us motion. They promised us play action. They promised us these things, and none of them have materialized. Like, there is still some meat on the bone for the Steelers, maybe being 1-2 and losing to the Bengals at home is what they need here because I'll say this: the Packers' defense is havable, right? And it's not exactly the toughest matchup that the Pittsburgh Steelers have gone up against this year up front.
Okay, there we go. A little bit of hope. We didn't really touch on the Packers other than you saying that the defense isn't that great. But I mean, like, is there really anything else to the Packers other than Rodgers is once again playing unbelievable?
They still have the same problem that they had last year and the year before, is that they have one wide receiver that is reliable in the passing game. And against defenses that have depth, like Tampa Bay's, other defenses around the league like LA, they will struggle. But against a team like San Francisco, they can just lean it. I mean, you saw the drive when Adams got concussed for 2 minutes. That was the worst drive of the game, right? And so, and they're lost without him, and they're lost without a second option. To me, that has to be the thing where you're thinking about trade deadline, et cetera, et cetera. That's where the Packers have to look.
So is that more, like, when you say that, it sounds like it's kind of more of a postseason problem than a regular season.
Yeah, they're the baseball team that can win 110 games but don't have a number one starter and can't win series. You know what I mean? Like, they can win 13 games with this offense.
Right. They
just can't beat Tampa Bay. Right, and the research that we've done showed that, like, in the playoffs, your third and fourth receiver matter more than your first receiver in terms of production, because the good teams can take away your number one receiver, and that's where the Packers, I mean, they need to start thinking towards the playoffs, because if they go 10-7 and win the NFC North again and then lose in the playoffs, as you predicted, like, they're not going to be happy with that, right? They're not happy with that.
I just teed it up for you to validate me saying that they could potentially lose the
I
first round.
I think you could be right too. They might get a home playoff game, but defenses are more woke now to what it takes to stop offenses.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Starting with Tampa.
Our boss man, Chris Collinsworth, was saying on that final drive, everyone in the stadium knows the ball's going to Devontae Adams.
Right.
How do you let it
Why is it still open?
Yeah.
I think a better defense will prevent that.
Yeah, 24 defense in the NFL, it doesn't even matter, right? Like, they're not able to stop it. But the 8 that make it to the final 8 or something, they have a prayer. And that's what we've seen, why the Packers have come up short, and why they didn't come up short when Rodgers won his first Super Bowl. When Rodgers won his first Super Bowl, Jennings, Driver, Jordy Nelson was their wide receiver 4, Finley, that's how they won the Super Bowl. Now it's a consolidated version of that, and it fails in the playoffs.
You mentioned Tampa, and we've gone long enough on this show without getting to the biggest game, but I am going to make the people wait about 60 seconds longer because I got to talk to them about Pristine Auction. This is your go-to place for signed sports memorabilia. It's all auction style, so a lot of these great things you can find for any team, any player, whatever it is, you can start the bidding at $1. If you use the promo code PFF when you sign up, you're going to get $10 off whatever the first item is that you win. Not just the first one that you bet on, it's going to be the first one that you win. Pristine Auction. This is your go-to place. Signed sports memorabilia. It's your one-stop shop. You're not going to need to go anywhere else. All right, that was it. I stalled as long as I possibly could. Brady and Belichick, it's what everybody is talking about this week. But correct me if I'm wrong, guys. This isn't just the Tampa native in me speaking. When you take away the magnitude of Brady coming home, back to Foxborough, back to New England, this one should be a decently easy Bucs win. Or am I wrong?
No, I think you're right. They are a much better team than New England. If you're looking at it just in terms of this team versus this team, it's not one of the best matchups in the week, let alone the season. But it's Joe Montana against Bill Walsh. It's Bill Belichick against Tom Brady. It's not quite unprecedented unless you factor in the 20 years that Brady's been doing this, in which case everything is unprecedented.
That's true.
But we have seen this Joe Montana type of revenge game before. Week 2 of 1994, which we actually have graded on PFF. If you have a PFF Elite subscription, you go to Premium Stats, a little Easter egg, you go down to the drop down in year, find 1994, Week 2. And you get to see Joe Montana showing with his 89 grade that he still had some teeth.
Such an interesting contrast, too, because when he went and beat George Seifert and Steve Young had Jerry Rice, he had Brent Jones, he had the defense with Deion Sanders. And Joe Montana went in there with Willie Davis and J.J. Bird and a bunch of scrubs. It's the exact opposite here. Tom comes in, and now he doesn't have Gronk, but he comes in with Antonio Brown. He comes in with Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and that's why this matchup is so lopsided, because Belichick comes into it with Mac Jones, who's been the best rookie quarterback so far, but that's damning with faint praise.
And by the way, like Steve Young was fantastic in that game. Like he ended up on the losing side, so nobody cares.
Well, Derek Thomas was like, pass rushers affected the game back then.
Absolutely. But Joe Montana got all the plaudits, whereas in this game, Mac Jones has to try and be Steve Young, and that's probably not going to happen. The Bucs are on this incredible run of consecutive 30-point games. Since week 10 last year, they lead the NFL in terms of scoring drive percentage at 50%. So they're going to put up some points. I don't think Bill Belichick is going to render that offense inert. So Mac Jones is going to have to figure out a way of putting up like 30 points in this game behind an offense that isn't really set up for him doing it so far.
Feels like the game we just talked about. Like the Steelers not being able to keep up with the Packers, Patriots not being able to keep up with the Buccaneers accordingly. Losing James White could be pretty huge here, guys. He was more or less the number one receiver while he was active this year, with all due respect to Jacoby Myers and all that. But you take him out of the picture, they have J.J. Taylor, Ramondre Stevenson, Damian Harris. None of these guys are what the cool kids would call like a super pass-friendly running back. Maybe Taylor has that skill set in him, but we haven't seen him yet. In Fantasyland, I'm okay with Damian Harris. He's my RB24. I'm actually more interested in Leonard Fournette because Giovanni Bernard is out of this game. So Lombardi Lenny, hasn't been the kindest guy to us in Fantasyland over the years, but you take away Gio's targets, and all of a sudden Lenny has the workload we're looking for in Fantasyland.
Yeah, I mean, you taking Gio's targets, the injury report is going to mean a lot in this, right? Because I think on paper, if everything's healthy, you're right. It's not really a match. The Patriots don't really match up, but not only are the Bucs down Gio Bernard, they're down Rob Gronkowski. He's not playing in this game. They're down their two corners for sure, Sean Murphy-Bunting and Jamel Dean. They are out.
Sherman is starting.
Carlton Davis might also be out, and we heard this morning, Richard Sherman is going to start. This dude's 33 years old. Tom Brady called him 2 weeks ago to check if he was in shape, okay?
He's one of my coworkers closest in age to me.
Yeah.
That's true, actually.
And look, that's got to factor in, right?
Does that make you feel old or young?
Old. And young.
I know.
But he's playing in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Like, it's got to make you
Yeah,
feel,
that's good.
It's a little of both.
You still got some juice.
All right, okay.
Like Sherman,
you can go out there.
I know he's really smart. Stanford grad, obviously, but he's got to learn entire defense in under a week.
Right.
And look, the dude's got a PFF podcast to prepare for. That takes some time. We know. Look, that's a tough.
At least for you, maybe not Steve.
I was gonna say, you just show up and just do it.
Well, look, I've got notes. Don't worry about it.
I just think that's wild that we're at this point, because Sherman at Bucs practice earlier this week, somebody's like, "Oh, do you expect to play against New England?" And he's like, "No."
What was the reason the Bucs won the Super Bowl last year? They had injuries, but they happened sort of at the right time, and the guys recovered at the right time, right? They had the bye late in the season.
Of course.
You had Vita Vea back in the playoffs. As you said, Trevor, injuries shape what happens in the season. Right now, the Rams are really healthy. They look like the best team in the NFC. When the Bucs round into form, that might change, but it really changes the complexion of the season. We talk about the Chiefs in the AFC. The Bills are pretty healthy, right? And the Chiefs aren't, and that we'll see that next week. But again, injuries, as you said, shape the complexion not only of games but of seasons.
And I think the Sherman signing is for the playoffs and for beyond. It's just that they have to turn to him now anyway. This is a move
you can't do that much damage out there, right?
Right. I mean, this is a move for if the three cornerbacks go down in the playoffs again, we're going to need a better contingency plan than we had. Yeah. So let's bring in Sherman, let's get him up to speed, and we'll be good. But that's turned into we need him to start against the Patriots this week.
And it is a relatively young unit, right? Like I wondered if they were going to bring in a veteran corner in free agency. They end up bringing back their entire Super Bowl roster. So I think that was probably the better choice. But I mean, Carlton Davis is 24. He's the oldest starting corner when everyone's healthy. So I mean, the Richie Sherman move is multi-layered, but there's no doubt about it that throwing him out there, 33 years old, straight off the podcast mic, if you will, it's going to be interesting. Eric, I think the Patriots are getting 5.5 on this one at home?
Yeah, it's gone all the way up to 7. George and I got 5.5 on the Sunday night forecast. We've seen some buyback on New England. I understand that actually, 6.5. That's kind of where it's going. As we talked about on the college show, this is what we call two-way action, which is, a fun betting term.
Arizona Cardinals, Los Angeles Rams. Next divisional matchup that we're getting to. Not only is it a divisional matchup, these are two of the undefeated teams left.
Yeah.
And they've been playing on fire, right? I mean, you look at what Matt Stafford has been able to do in that Sean McVay offense. It's been a lot of fun. He pushed the ball deep when they played against Tampa last week. And, of course, the Arizona Cardinals are being led by Kyler Murray, who looks like a damn MVP candidate. So this was fun. There's a lot of potential fireworks here. Ian, I feel like there's so many different playmakers. Where does your mind go first when it comes to what could be a difference maker or just who might stand out?
This might be the week we finally see Matthew Stafford get the sort of, pass attempt total that he used to get on the reg in Detroit. Now, they haven't needed that this year because they blew out the Bears. They were up multiple scores on the Colts for most of that game. And the Bucs ended up trailing a bunch in the second half. But that's why so many haven't been too worried about Robert Woods in this slow start to the year, because his target share numbers are fine. He's still a number 2 receiver, and this offense looks better than ever. It's just been 3 weeks, guys, and fantasy managers have the patience of an infant with this type of stuff. So that's why everyone's panicking on the artist known as Bobby Trees. So let me tell you, don't panic. He's still Robert Woods. He's still a number 2 receiver in a great offense, and it's going to come. Could particularly happen, this week, and the first of many NFC West shows.
Yeah, interestingly though, right, the consolidation has been mostly to Cooper Kupp, and his prop right now is 6.5 catches. You have to lay a little bit of a price for it, minus 137. The Cardinals have been remarkable in their distribution. Like AJ Green has the most targets on that team right now, and so he historically used to be Hopkins getting the 6.5 prop, and you'd bet into it. But right now, even to what Ian is saying, maybe Robert Woods gets more targets this week. Still take the Kupp over until it dries up, because he's going to get it there, and the Cardinals are not a defense with a scheme or the players to stop one particular player.
The Kupp over until it dries up. Was that on purpose? A little pun there. Just so everybody heard the brilliance of the pun. But I wanted to piggyback off that, because you mentioned Cardinals are targeting AJ Green the most on this team. Yet here they are, undefeated. Kyle Murray's playing super well. Is that a super encouraging note, you think? That they're not even optimizing what we would consider as maybe their best playmakers or their best play designs. And here they are, still undefeated, 3 games into the season, looking really great.
There's 2 ways to look at it. One way is to say Cliff Kingsbury is not even trying, and they're still overcoming it. And the other way to look at it is last year when they started out so hot, it was because they were pushing all the buttons they had, and then once those dried up, they were not able to do anything after. They still have buttons to push now, so that is a positive. It's just the question remains, does Cliff have sort of a left hand when it comes to this offense?
I'm a positive guy.
It's only a
We're doing
positive
things on the show.
Yeah, it's only a positive if they're going to hit those buttons at some point. And that's a big unknown with this offense. Yes, you can optimize it an awful lot better if you start taking a lot of those targets away from AJ Green and moving them to the receivers that can, get open and still make plays. But if you don't do that, all you're doing is just hampering yourself through the entire season.
Yeah, the addition of Rondale Moore really helps that offense. Christian Kirk's emergence has been fantastic. The second highest graded wide receiver in our system so far.
I do wonder if this could be the natural get-right spot for Hopkins. I understand, those Hopkins-Ramsey one-on-one battles, Texans-Jaguars back in the day were great. I don't think that's what we're going to see this week. Jalen Ramsey has not been asked to be used in shadow coverage once all year. Last year, he only did it for DK Metcalf, Devontae Adams, and Mike Evans. Just played Mike Evans last week, chose not to do it this time around. So I think they're going to let him continue to be more involved in the play-by-play basis, setting the edge out of the slot, things of that nature. And maybe, just maybe, we get DeAndre Hopkins, that double-digit target total that we're all used to. Could be a sneaky blow-up spot. Everyone in DFS is on Tyreek, Devontae Adams, and Stephon Diggs, which is fine. They're all great. But when you see 4 great receivers, everyone's on 3 of them. They're forgetting about one. Good call in terms to go after that one.
What about the Cardinals' defense? I feel like the Cardinals' defense has stepped up a little bit this year, at least on the front. I mean, do you see it the same, Sam?
And on the back end. I mean, going into the season, Arizona's cornerback group looked like one of the weakest units in the entire NFL at any spot. And they are allowing the lowest percentage of explosive pass plays in the league this season, under 6%. And that's a good thing for those Cooper Kupp numbers, because they're going to try and take away what the Bucs were giving up all last week, which was the shot to Deshaun Jackson over the top for the big play. They hit on one of them. They could have had 3 of them over the course of that game. Arizona so far has been really good at taking that away and forcing you to play underneath. And if they can do that again, it's probably the best way of playing this offense right now.
Baltimore Ravens at the Denver Broncos, right? So, Denver notably has not beaten a team yet with a win. They're still undefeated, so all the Broncos fans are saying, like, hey, they haven't lost. They haven't exactly played the best competition yet. Melvin Gordon questionable in this game, but he is expected to play also questionable. Marquise Brown's hands, whether or not they're going to come together when the football gets near him. Sorry, I had to do it. I'm sorry. It was just, look.
He was limited in practice for a completely different reason.
So what do we?
Give the guy a break. He had one bad game.
Come on! Those were two obvious catches that he has to bring in, Ian.
But the streak he was on, man. He had 10 straight games with at least 80 yards and a touchdown before last week. So, because everyone wrote this dude off in the fantasy community after like week 9 last year, and I get it. You know, we had situations.
He would have written himself off if he would have hung onto the pen.
He would have cut himself from his own team, I'm sure. Oh, I see what you did there. Okay, that was mean. Eric slander aside, like he's still the number 1 receiver in an offense that has been throwing the ball with at least more production and I think more success than we're used to seeing. I mean, Lamar Jackson has the highest average target depth in the league. There's a lot of quarterbacks, Jimmy G, and among other guys that, you know, you can tell they're a product of the system and stuff. Lamar is the system. It's no wonder he had the back injury. He's been carrying the team for 3 years.
What do you think about the Broncos side of things?
Their season starts this week. It's week 1 for them. The 3 previous games were their preseason run. Like they beat 3 teams, but they don't get credit for style points of beating those 3 teams. It's literally like the preseason. All I need you to do is check the box. Come out of the first 3 weeks 3-0, and then we can start and figure out where exactly this team is. So the fact that the defense has been incredible, and Teddy Bridgewater's looked better than he's ever looked before, and this offense looks fantastic, none of that means anything other than they've checked the box of beating those 3 bad teams. Now you face a team like Baltimore, who is like still number 5 in PFF's ELO rankings. Lamar's incredible, leading the league in average per rush and average per completion, average depth of target. Like he is just a big play waiting to happen. And all of a sudden, this Denver team needs to show that everything they just put out in the first 3 weeks still carries against, you know, real NFL teams.
Well, and I'll kind of like push back on you a little bit by saying, you know, when you say these are 3 preseason games, I don't totally disagree with you, but what's the saying? The saying is that the results in the preseason don't matter, but it's not that preseason games don't matter. What happens in the games still
being 3-0 has consequences, and they are good consequences. I will say, despite sort of the limited action they've had against real opponents, there are bettors who like the Denver Broncos in this spot. Like this number has gotten out to Baltimore -1 at times, and it's been quickly gone back to a pick'em, even to Denver favored. There are people who love, and Teddy Bridgewater is like 65% in his career against the spread. There are people who like Teddy Bridgewater, and he is consistently undervalued on the markets.
Has Denver shown you guys enough to at least believe that they're going to keep this one? Now, I know you said that like Vegas is kind of seeing this game like that.
I mean, the fact that they're a pick'em against the top 5 team in the NFL shows that people respect Denver.
Yeah.
The question is will they pull through? And because we have them actually, I believe, with the lowest probability of winning the AFC West, even at 3-0,
right,
just because of the road they have ahead, but also their T-Mobile fundamentals, which is they still probably have the worst quarterback in the division. And, you know, we've already seen defensive injuries with Chubb and so forth there. So there is a little bit to, you know, they have to prove here starting this week. But people are giving them the respect I think they deserve.
And I think that means a little bit more than even just like the 3-0. Because we do. The 3-0, it's the headline thing, it's the buy and sell and everything. But I feel as though the line being like that is the big takeaway, that at least people don't think that this undefeated, I shouldn't have used air quotes there, they are undefeated. This undefeated Denver Broncos team is at least going to hang against what you said, an unbelievable Lamar Jackson, a Ravens team that's rolling really well. Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers also face off, another big divisional matchup. I feel like we've talked about this every week, but again, this is a potential NFC Championship game right here, right? And these are 2 of the teams that people thought could be participating in the NFC, maybe representing the AFC or the NFC in the Super Bowl. George Kittle, questionable. He's going to play. Tyler Lockett was questionable. He's scheduled to play. Elijah Mitchell, I believe, is out, correct,
Yep.
Ian? Okay, so he is out. But what do we think about this matchup here, guys?
Lockett playing, I think, is big news for Seattle. But even if he's there, the big question is who is going to cover DK Metcalf for the 49ers? Because we saw last week what happens when they just go out there, play man coverage, and say, this guy will probably be open in this play. Can you hit him? And obviously the answer with Green Bay was, hell yes. The last time they played, the last time Emmanuel Mosley played against DK Metcalf, he gave up 133 yards, 2 touchdowns, a ton of catches. 120 of those were to Metcalf and both touchdowns. They just don't have anybody on their cornerback stable that can even come close to hanging with a freak athlete that is DK Metcalf.
I feel like with Metcalf, and we saw this last week when he torched Patrick Peterson on more than a few occasions, but we don't really see him get shut down. Like there were some games over the years where it seemed like Russell Wilson was hesitant to throw him the ball because you got Tyler Lockett running wide open all across the field as well. Like if you just look at the low yardage total gains from Metcalf, he's only getting 4 or 5 targets. So unless it's Jalen Ramsey, I don't know if there's a secondary in the league that can really touch this guy, particularly not the 49ers one that, again, it's Devontae Adams. He's right there. Just put 2 guys on him at some point.
Yeah, I think the issue, though, is you look at the other side, right? And you look at a quarterback in Jimmy G who's limited, but the Seahawks don't do things with their bad personnel to limit quarterbacks, right? 92% of the time, they show the same coverage that they play, right? Which is not confusing anybody. The great defenses of the NFL, like the LA Rams, like the LA Chargers, it's 60% of the time, right? So you're all the way dropping down to that. Having, like, deception matters. And it just looks like Pete Carroll just rolls the ball out, wants to line up and play football, and they're not good enough to do that. And that's why the Niners are favored in this game, even though people have been betting into the Seattle Seahawks through a field goal, now down to +2.
What do we think about that San Francisco running back room with Mitchell out, Ian?
We can go back to Trey Sermon to an extent, but what was problematic last week, like in week 1 when Raheem Mostert gets hurt, it just became the Elijah Mitchell show. And then we had JaMychal Hasty stepping in. It finally comes time for Trey Sermon's turn. I do think he got better as the game went on. He broke something like 4. It was like 0.4 missed tackles per carry, which I could just tell you is a very, very good and high number. But who was on the field in the 2-minute drive when it mattered? Kyle Juszczyk, which is great for Kyle Juszczyk and everyone that loves fullbacks because you should love fullbacks.
We all do.
Not so great for us fantasy managers trying to get those ever important targets. So for me, Trey Sermon, he's a fine start, but the top 20, the top 15 hopes that we had, we got to find out that Kyle Shanahan likes him as much as we all do, because right now it's just one kind of week after another. Sure doesn't seem that way. At least Brandon Ayuk is finally out of the doghouse.
Right, yeah.
And I think we can get back to trusting him as a top 30 or so option.
Niners favored by 3.5 at home. How do we feel about it, Eric?
Yeah, that's where it opened. Now it's 2, so it's gone through that key number of 3. I think the only way to bet Seattle now would be to tease them up to 8, 8.5 or so. Find another teaser, maybe something like Detroit on the betting market there. But yeah, this has been something where the bettors have liked Seattle despite all the foibles that they showed last week against Minnesota.
Final divisional game that we are previewing here on this show is the Raiders traveling to Los Angeles to face the Chargers. This one, it's got fun written all over it, right? These are 2 offenses that are really clicking. You've got an MVP candidate in Derek Carr who's playing what feels like the best ball of his career. Yeah. Justin Herbert just seems to evolve every single week. And so, Ian, I'll start with you, man. When you look at this Raiders offense, how fun has it been to watch Derek Carr really take to these receivers? And obviously, when I say receivers, I also mean Darren Waller, the tight end there. It's just been a blast to watch.
It has, and I think our own Mike Renner wrote up PFF, sorry about your Irish, but he made a really good point a couple weeks ago about this, how they basically embrace like a poor man's version of the Chiefs offense. We're not going to confuse Derek Carr with Mahomes, nor Tyreek with Henry Ruggs, but they have the alpha tight end, Darren Waller, who basically is a number 1 pass game option, even if he makes less than the wide receivers. Henry Ruggs, you need to respect that deep speed. He's gotten a deep one every week. Should have had another one last week, but Carr just missed one of the throws. And even Bryan Edwards, despite him not getting a bunch of targets, still is making the most out of it. So, the running back room, I'm not sure why Peyton Barber is 3rd in the NFL in carries over the past 2 weeks, but you know what? He even looked pretty good last week as well. The big thing for me is this offense was really good last year. They were 10th in scoring. John Gruden has consistently come up pretty high, particularly in the scripted portion of games in the beginning. Max Crosby in this defense, though, is why the Raiders are actually competing and why Carr is now in the MVP.
And that's why you're getting a great price on this Justin Herbert prop, right? 2.5 touchdowns, you're getting +166. Bet Herbert to throw 3 or more touchdowns at a plus price. But to your point about Carr, 13 big-time throws, 9.9 average depth of target, and yet he's still one of the highest-graded quarterbacks in football. That risk-reward profile that they've had for 2 years now in Las Vegas has been, probably the best risk-reward profile anybody's ever had in Vegas.
It's interesting. We do all these previews, and it's all about the quarterbacks, it's all about the receivers, the running backs, all these big-ticket items. But every now and again, there's a mismatch in the trenches that's so big that I think it can actually determine which way the game goes. And the Raiders have the number 1 pass rushing grade in the NFL using our numbers, but they haven't faced anybody of any kind of quality, right? 3 bad offensive lines that haven't really given them any kind of challenge. Max Crosby is leading the NFL with 25 total pressures, and when he faces better offensive linemen, he might come unstuck. But The Chargers have Storm Norton at right tackle, who has a pass blocking grade of 36 right now, gave up 9 pressures against Dallas to a rookie linebacker,
Living up to his name.
Yeah, moonlighting on the defensive line. I just think that this is a game where Max Crosby could absolutely go off, and suddenly the 25% that Justin Herbert has been under pressure so far this year could be jumping back up to like 40% from his rookie season, and they actually have some real problems on offense.
How sustainable do we think the Raiders' defense is here? Because, as Ian mentioned, this is top 10 scoring offense last year, right? I mean, offense has not been the problem for the Raiders. It's always been the defense kind of letting them down. Obviously, you mentioned the pass rush grade's incredibly high right now. Max Crosby is leading the way for that, but how sustainable do we think that is? Do we think this legitimately makes them a threat for maybe not the division because the Chiefs are in the division, but a really strong playoff contender when it comes down to it?
Yeah, I mean, they have the 5th hardest schedule coming up, right? That was always the mark against them, betting into their season win total over, was that they had a tough schedule. But, they faced 3 teams that won 10 games or more last year, and they've won all 3 of them so far. So maybe it won't be as tough as we think.
I think their pass rush, isn't as good as it looks right now, the number 1 pass rush in the NFL, but Casey Hayward at cornerback may be one of the biggest single additions to any team in this offseason. They kind of roll the dice to bring in a guy who has a decade of play where he's in the top 3 of PFF's grades. Looked terrible last year, and at 32 or whatever he is, you're like, oh, that's Casey Hayward done. The Raiders decided to bring him in and see if that was the case, because if it isn't, and if he bounces back to where he was, which so far he's done, they get
value.
Right, they get like a top level number 1 corner for nothing, like for just rolling the dice on the contract.
Right. Mike Williams, another solid matchup. What do we think?
Another one. Is he going to slow down at some point, Eric? Maybe not. Number 2 wide receiver in all of fantasy right now. Like, okay, some of you might be in a 4-team league or something. You can find a way to put the man on the bench. Other than these exceptions, he needs to be out there every single time. I do wonder, we have Eckler, we have Keenan. I don't think Mike's going to continue to beat out those guys necessarily. At a minimum, though, we are looking at a far more consistent version of Mike than we have in past years. And this specific spot, that is going to be, I don't want to say a blow-up potential for him because Hayward is playing that well, but it's going to be a high-scoring game, gents. I see that 53-point total. I know the public, the guys that lose money like to take the over a lot, but Eric, come on, this should be one of the
Chargers are 3-0 to the under this year. So.
There we go.
3-0 to the under?
Yeah, including last week against the Chiefs.
Always ruins my fun.
Do we have any final AFC West thoughts on what we think of the division right now? Because obviously we were Chiefs, big time favorites, but it feels like every team in that division obviously killing it right now.
This is the first time since 2016 the Chiefs have not been better than even money to win the division. Right now they're plus 105, plus 110, depending upon where you look. This is also the first time they haven't been in first place since Barack Obama was president. So, it's an opportunity if you buy into them. But the division is strong beneath them.
The PFF projections still like the Chiefs to come through and win that division, right? But this is a game where if the Raiders win this and they beat the Chargers, in addition to those 3 tough teams they beat to start the season, that's them putting themselves in pole position. For that division.
we got a bet. Ben Brown and I got a bet. Chiefs first place, Raiders second place. It was something like 9-1. If the Raiders win on Monday Night Football, that bet becomes very likely to win.
Yeah.
I'll go bet right now on the Chiefs.
Did we all have a wild card team from the AFC West? Do you remember who it was for you guys?
If not 2. I
think did you have 2? Did you have 2 in there?
Yeah, I think especially now that I don't think the East is going to get one. New England and Miami
I
are
think
pretty good.
I think I had the Chargers.
I'm pretty sure I had the Chargers and the Raiders coming out.
Okay, so you have both. So you got to be feeling good about it.
Yeah,
right
now it's a good division.
Yeah,
I was going to say. What about you?
Even in the AFC North, our Bengals, nice success aside, these Ravens and Steelers teams don't look like quite the same juggernaut as past year. So we might see that rare 3 playoff team division.
All right, we're talking about the AFC West. We're talking about a lot of other prop bets as well. Some big time storylines with our man Darius Butler actually coming up next. All right, now it's time to bring in everybody's favorite DB. That is Darius Butler. Darius, how you doing today, my man?
Doing great. What's up, fellas? How you doing?
We're feeling good. We're ready for this. We're ready for this Week 4 action. There's a lot of really great games that we just previewed, but I want to get your take on something. And I got to get your take on the big storyline. It's the Brady and Belichick game, but you had a special connection because you were drafted by the New England Patriots back in 2009. So, Belichick, Brady. This is what everybody's been talking about all week. Take me into what you think this game's going to be like for both of these guys.
I mean, it's gonna be crazy. A lot of noise, obviously, surrounding the game. It's funny. I had a Patriot player, Trent Brown, who was a starter, obviously starting right tackle coming into the season. We had him on before the season. He had no idea who they opened the season up with, but he knew which week Brady was coming back to town. So that's how big this game is, man. It's gonna be crazy. The energy's gonna be crazy. I know we all saw Tom Brady's hype video. Belichick will be just as hyped for this one. These are two, ultimate competitors. In my opinion, greatest coach of all time, greatest quarterback of all time. They know each other, better than anyone else in the league. So I think it's going to be a great kind of knock them out, drag out type of game. It's going to go down to the end, man. But I'm excited.
Now both of these guys, and you mentioned it there. They're some of the biggest competitors in a super competitive sport. Do you think there's love lost between these guys? Like, I know everybody is like, ooh, like Brady doesn't like Belichick anymore because of how he handled things down the stretch. I mean, Belichick, obviously, we know he's not a man of many words anyways, so nobody ever knows what Belichick is thinking. But do you think there's still that level of respect between these dudes, or do you really think that there's more animosity there than maybe respect?
No, I think it's ultimate respect. I mean, these guys did something that we probably will never see again in this sport. Relationships, man, relationships are tough, man. They had a 20-year, marriage. And I don't think any of us know any 20-year marriage that was just smooth sailing. It obviously didn't end great for both sides. But, Brady went on and won a Super Bowl. And, Belichick, he at least wants this win. This game. I mean, this is going to mean, everything to him. Obviously, these guys, both of them, their legacies are cemented in stone. But, it's going to be a great game. Both of these teams, both of these competitors. Belichick won't be out there. He won't take any snaps, but he'll have his guys prepared. He knows these guys met a lot, one-on-one, so they picked each other's brains. So, I'm intrigued for one, just to see how this thing will actually play out. But it's going to be great. I'm excited about it. It's not probably won't be the best game today, but obviously it'll be the biggest and most talked about, and I'm glad it's on Sunday Night Football.
What are we getting after the game? Are we getting a handshake? Are we getting a hug between these guys? Are we getting like that tap on the back while you keep walking to the other sideline? What's the bet here? What are we getting with these two?
These are two of the sorest losers the sport has ever seen, which, that's what you get out of champions. So, honestly, I think it depends on how this game will go. Who loses and how bad they lose. If it's a blowout one way or another, I don't think you get much of an embrace. If it's kind of a great game that comes down to a field goal at the end, I think you'll see, a hug and a handshake. But who knows? Who knows, what really is going on and transpired behind closed doors. Like I said, these guys have, competed and done some, amazing things and, a lot of, common suffering as well. Some down years, some up years. They've lost Super Bowls together, won Super Bowls together. So hopefully, either way we get that, I want to see, a good embrace because it's probably the last time, they'll probably share the field together. So it's one for the history books. Everybody who's, watches football, who's into it, rooting against them, rooting for these guys. Most fans hated both these people together. Now a lot of fans love Tom Brady, kind of 2.0 down in Tampa. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I hope personally they have a nice warm embrace after the game, but who knows? Like I said, two very sore losers.
I do too, man. Football fans deserve it, right? For all of the Brady and the Belichick that we talked about and we've watched over the last 20 years, I want a solid bro hug in there. I want to see the picture of it. So I'm totally with you. Something that we found out kind of before the show as we were looking things up, two of Brady's lowest graded games since 2018 have come against Belichick disciples, Matt Patricia and Brian Flores. And so I find that so fascinating that Brady has practiced against and knows Belichick in New England so well, and yet he still struggled against Belichick's disciples. Now he's going up against Belichick himself for the first time. Does that kind of sway your opinion of, you mentioned it might not be the best game, but does that kind of change your mind a little bit of how close it might be?
No, I do think it'll be a good game, and I'm definitely giving the Patriots. The only concern for me is, can Mac Jones keep up with Tom Brady? And, obviously we know Brady can put up points. He's going to drive the ball down the field. His weapons are much better than Mac Jones, so that's my concern there. But defensively for the Patriots, obviously Brady knows that defense, but vice versa. You practice against Brady a bunch. McCourty's practiced against him a bunch. They know his snap counts. And honestly, if you played in that offense, you played against it, he's been making the same checks for 20 years. He's been making the same adjustments. It's been the same, talking to the line. So I doubt he'll switch it up. You can't switch all of those things up going into one game. So it'll be some things that they'll be on top of, and it's just going to come down to execution. And it's going to come down to probably 3 or 4 plays, that's going to sway this game one way or the other.
I wanted to throw some prop bets at you, and the first one, I'll just keep it on topic. Brady's touchdown total is 2.5. You think he's going over or under 2.5 today?
I would have to go with the over.
Yeah,
I'm going with the over on that.
Me too.
Sure.
Me too. I think that it's just like a total revenge game for him. What about What about Josh Allen? Josh Allen's over under for rushing this game is 34.5. We think Josh got the wheels to go over 34.5. What do you think about that?
Wait, we still on the Bucks pick?
No. We moved on. Josh Allen, the quarterback of the Buffalo Bills. He's got Brady ain't rushing for 34.5. Yeah, that would have been.
Wait. Something got to be wrong here. I will go under. Hopefully, he improvises a lot, and he is, kind of the biggest part of the run game. But I'm going to go under. At this point of the season, you want to kind of keep him out of harm's way. And this is a game, Houston, they should be up a bunch. So I would say I will go under. Hopefully, Brian Daboll's telling him, hey, stay your ass in that pocket.
So the last one that I want to talk about, and it's a bigger topic that I want to get into. The prop bet is Najee Harris. I believe the over/under for his receiving yards, it's 35.5 for receiving yards for the Steelers running back Najee Harris.
That's a tough number.
This man got 19 targets last week. Like, that's just unbelievable. I feel like the Patriots listened to what all of us said about drafting a running back in the first round, and we're like, you don't get that much use out of it. You're not going to get that much return. And they're like, we're going to get as much possible return as we can on Najee Harris. 19 targets for a running back? That's crazy, is it not?
I mean, it is crazy unless you watch that Pittsburgh Steelers offense. And you see Big Ben, I don't think he pushed the ball more than 9 yards down the field. You guys would know better than me, obviously, but just watching from the naked eye, I mean, everything's short. Najee's, he is their best offensive weapon, it looks like, especially with Claypool out today. So I would take that number. I would take that over on that one. 7.5
average target depth, so he's on it.
Okay, all right. So he's got it. You were on it. You were on top of it. We had faith all along. I want to get to Chicago. I want to talk about another quarterback, Justin Fields. We talked about him last week, and you've obviously been bullish about what you think that Fields could be and how much talent he has. But last week he gets the start for Chicago. Let's just say the game plan didn't look like it was designed to be the best game plan possible for not just a rookie quarterback, but also a quarterback of Fields' talents. I'm curious, how common is that? You've been on the other side of things. You've been in the league. Like, how common is it that a coach really just doesn't have the right game plan for a guy or just doesn't use a guy correctly? Is that possible? Are we seeing things correctly, or are we blowing things out of proportion on this side of the field?
It's definitely common to go into a game and not have a great game plan. But that was like an anomaly almost. It was so bad that you watch it. High school, college. I don't think I've seen that more than probably 3 times in my life. So it was one of those things that's like, it was so bad. It's like, I got to pretend like it didn't even happen. I have to pretend like you just completely adjust and do something different. I personally have no faith in Matt Nagy. I have a ton of faith in Justin Fields and his projection, his trajectory. But Matt Nagy, I think, will hold him back. So when he's gone, we'll see the real Justin Fields. But even still, I think we'll see a much different Justin Fields today. He won't be facing Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney either. But I've seen some bad game plans by coaches, but nothing close to that. Nothing close to that. So I think he'll be better today. And hopefully Nagy makes some type of adjustments, and then we'll see him improvising. But I think the Lions are going to get that win as dogs on the road.
Ooh, there we go. See, I feel you that it was kind of like a game plan where it's like just throw it out and never think about it again. But in all honesty, I think Matt Nagy should keep it as I should never do this ever again. No, so maybe not throw it away. Just make sure that you never repeat yourself. Ian, actually, we're sticking with some bets and some fantasy talk here as we kind of round out the show. Get you a little contrarian segment here with some fantasy guys that you're either bullish on or telling people to stay away from. We're a couple of guys that we need to know before we get out of here.
3 guys for DraftKings, and again, if there are going to be some pitfalls with these guys, because we are trying to get contrarian, that's why their projected ownership is as low as it is. And let's stick with the Bears game. Allen Robinson coming in at 5,800. Everyone's expecting a David Montgomery bounce back. You don't want Fields to have the ball in his hand after last week. I'm with Darius. Let's forget that happened a little bit, and remember, we're 3 games into a year and one of the NFL's perennial top most talented receivers facing the Detroit Lions, who have barely stopped anyone this year. So love the chances of A-Rob getting back on track. And then also just fading recency bias. Najee Harris might not get 19 targets every single week. So why not go $200 up and get Nick Chubb? And like, guys, I'm waiting for I love, next gens are little dots, and you see Chubb break one. Then you see Baker Mayfield running like a lunatic behind him. We're overdue for one of those moments, and Nick Chubb, we know, has that 200-yard multi-touchdown explosion in his potential range of outcomes. Everyone's on the receivers in this matchup. I like the idea of going down to Chubb. And then finally, Kyle Pitts, generational tight end that nobody could stop talking about all offseason.
Feed the man.
Unfortunately, 3 down games, but the snaps have been going up. He is their number 2 receiver, particularly with Russell Gage out. And as Eric might have told us 5 times before the season started, Washington football team defense maybe a little bit overrated, and we've seen that in back-to-back weeks.
Darius, what do you think about any of those guys? Chubb, Kyle Pitts, Allen Robinson, what do you think?
First of all, Eric was on point, and he was the first guy and the loudest guy on that mountaintop about Washington football's defense. And one of my co-hosts, Antoine, would say, "Oh no, they're gonna be top 5, gonna be this and that." And I believed him, but so Eric was right about that. I'm on that Allen Robinson train. I think he'll have a big week this week. When you struggle like that, especially offensively, hopefully my mind as an offensive coach would be, hey, next week I have to find a way to get the ball to my best players. And you got Allen Robinson against this week Detroit secondary, so I'm high on that one. Najee Harris, he went to Chubb.
Yeah,
I hate the Chubb just because he splits carries with Kareem Hunt. Kareem is another probably top 7, 8 running back in this league right now. But Chubb is one of those guys who can break one at any time. But I don't think he's even getting 18, 20 touches a game. So he's a tough one to go with. I'll stick with those 2 right now.
You got any best bets for the week before we get you out of here? You mentioned you think Detroit's coming out with a W? You think Detroit? Anybody else?
Yeah, Detroit has been fighting. They've been playing well. They were, an NFL record 66-yard field goal away from getting their first win against the Ravens, last week. And you heard the OC, Anthony Lynn and Dan Campbell talking about getting Swift even more involved in the game plan. I think he's one of those dynamic running backs who can get more touches. I think he's getting 17 a game, which is already tough. So to see that go up, hopefully over 20 today, I would take his. I think his prop is at 36.5 receiving yards today. I think that's an easy one.
I felt like when Justin Tucker kicked that field goal and the ball hit the post and then just popped straight up, that was like the longest 2 seconds in NFL history. We were all just sitting there like, which way did the ball bounce? Which way?
That was the Calvin Johnson curse right there. If they would have paid Calvin Johnson money, I think would have bounced back. But since he was in the building, they didn't give him his money. He was pissed off. Fans were pissed. That thing bounced right in. So that's what they deserve.
That's a deep cut. That's a deep curse if that's the case. Darius, appreciate it, man, as always.
Appreciate you, fellas.
All right, for Darius Butler, for everybody at the new PFF desk, thank you guys so much for watching the show. Be excited for everything that we got going on this week, because so many great divisional games, so many great storylines. Enjoy it all. We will see you guys right here next week. We'll be right back.